Money is not neutral. It carries culture, history, and expectations.
Join us for honest conversations about the real costs behind how we live, love, give, and just survive in this complex world.
Money. It is not black or white.
Powered by GoTyme.
Inna Mapalomaku.
And I'm Maya Fisher-French. Welcome to our podcast.
Mapalo, we're finally doing this podcast. How long, A, have we known each other, and B, been talking about doing this?
Maya, we have known each other for almost a decade. That's a very long time. And in those years, we have spoken about culture, tradition, and the differences between black and white people.
Yeah, we've gone there. Trust me, we've gone there. And we've had serious conversations and we've had amazing laughter.
Hilarious conversations.
We think it's very, very funny. So we want to get you and the wider audience and the wider South Africans having the same conversations we're having.
Absolutely, Maya. And where did it start also? When you said, Mapalo, we have to do this. Remember the story I told you?
I remember. I so clearly remember we were doing a function together and you walked up to me and you said, Maya, I have to talk to you. I have just attended my first white person's funeral and I am sorry. I know we overdo things in the black culture, but there is something wrong with you people.
Yeah.
And I want you to explain your experience.
And that's exactly that, Maya. I've always thought, you know what? I know we do way too much, but you guys, you do way too little. So I go to this funeral. By the way, I got invited.
Yes.
My husband and I got invited. And I was like, I thought we were just going to rock up. Isn't that what people do?
Oh, no. You get invited to white funerals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
you can't just bitch.
So we got invited. We said, of course, we were going to come either way. All right. We go to the funeral. It is at a hotel in a hall, right?
No church.
No church, no choir singing, the whole works, nothing. And it lasted for exactly an hour and 15 minutes. When it ended, the MC said, thank you so much for being here. We apologize for running over time. I almost fell off my chair. What do you mean you're apologizing that it ran over by 15 minutes and 15 minutes only? And so I was shocked. I was looking at my husband like, what did we just experience? Then when it was wrapped up, there was sandwiches, no 7 colors, no Sunday course, nothing. It was sandwiches, a little bit of quiche here and there, and some bubbly and tea. And I thought to myself, what is happening? My mind was just reeling. It was so bad. We got home on our drive there. I said, how do you spend an hour and apologize for 15 minutes for someone who lived a life 50, 60 years plus? And we got home, called my siblings and told them that the entire thing. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to play some gospel music just to make sure that we send off our friend in a good way.
What were you expecting? Like, if this was an African funeral,
I
I come to your funeral one day. I hope that never happens. But, what would I expect?
Maya, you wouldn't have gone to just a funeral, okay? So first thing that kind of baffled me, I said, where are all the cars? Why aren't people coming, paying their last respect?
This is a neighbor of yours.
Yeah, it's literally
people coming and going.
I'm like, there's quite just a tiny few cars here and there. But with us, by the day that the person has passed away, there are neighbors, people come from different parts of the country, and you see cars just lining up. I mean, even neighbors know that, okay, we have to give up our parking so that, people can start parking in front because there's a funeral. So that was the first thing that I thought to myself, what is going on here? Did they have people that loved them? Or
so you see that as like, oh my gosh, there's nobody really loved these people. They don't even come together.
Isolated, but I knew he was a very friendly guy, right? So that was the first thing. Then the invitation. What? What do you mean you get invited to a funeral?
It's not a wedding. It's a funeral.
It's a funeral. Everybody's supposed to, if you knew this person by any form, shape, you need to go, right? Then there was champagne at the funeral. Then someone apologized for running over by 15 minutes. Yeah, so it was a whole shocking experience for me.
And the food, you was talking about the 7 colors.
Maya, where is the stew? Where is the beetroot? Where are the carrots? It needs to look like your mother cooked a hearty meal on a Sunday. And there was just sandwiches.
So, when you told me this story of yours, and I was like, okay, well, maybe it was just a bit of a toned down type of funeral. But I actually attended a funeral recently, and I must say I haven't been to many, but again, we have to discuss about the expectations around going to funerals in the different cultures, because remember, I have to get invited. I can't just pitch. And it was actually really similar, because and the food as well, it was just sort of sandwiches and a few things like that. There's no big expense or anything really like that. And I really thought about what you'd said. And I think one of the problems in the white culture is busyness. We are very busy people, and we slot people in to our lives. That's our approach. Sure. And in fact, this one funeral I went to, it was the day of the day after the national budget. And I was like, gosh, okay, I've got to fit this in. I've got to drive there. I've got to get there. And these were people that I really cared about. And yet you're slotting them in. And I thought, I think Mapelo has a point. I think there's something wrong when you're slotting people in who have lived a full life, whose life you should be celebrating. So I think somewhere there's got to be more. But I also, you do recognize that even it's going to come as a surprise, but not all white people are the same. So there is within white culture different traditions. Yes. So certainly if you look at the Jewish tradition, for example, so they are like the Muslims will bury immediately. But then for the week afterwards, that you sit Shiva. And people come to your home. But their point of coming to your home is to bring food and to bring support. So you're not feeding them. You're not expected to feed them. They come to feed you. So, but for a whole week, that is very much part of their tradition. And certainly in the Catholic tradition, and if you'll see it in Ireland, they call it the wake. Yes. Where for a whole week before the burial, the casket is there and you come pay your respects. It can even be an open casket. So there are elements of that. I agree with you. But maybe the kind of more sort of urbanized person like myself, I think we could learn a lot from that.
No, Maya, for me it was really shocking. And I think that was like what kind of bothered me, that I've always thought that I wanted a simple funeral. I thought, just don't do too much. And after having gone to that funeral, I was like, I am man. Give me the whole thing. And for me, it just felt it feels so personal when people are coming to your home, sharing memories of you. I think there's something quite comforting with that. And that's why I said to you, I know your desire is not to have the big woo-ha, but if ever it happens, tell John that I will be there welcoming people. I will bring a 20 liter of cookies, because that's what people normally do when they do visit you. A 20 liter of cookies, and people have tea and people come and help. So it's about community for me. That's what it feels like. And I think it's happening because I'm getting older, because when I was younger, I said, no, none of these things. But now as I get older, I'm like, I want all of that.
So I told John, John's my husband, and Mapelo knows him well, that they get on really well. And I said, by the way, I need to warn you that if something happens to me, Mapelo will be on the doorstep with a big bucket of biscuits. And he was like, I don't want people coming. I don't want people coming. The worst thing in the whole world for him is the idea that for a whole week, people will be coming to visit and to pay their respects, because he said, I will be grieving. I will be unhappy. I'll be sad. I don't want to deal with other people's grief. So he had a totally different reaction.
So it feels like it's taking on other people's grief while he's grieving himself.
Exactly. So he had a totally different reaction. And I think that's also maybe where culture comes in. And again, where maybe in white funerals or white grieving, it's more private. It's more about the family. It's more internalized.
It is very internalized.
Very internalized rather than community. Because you also were saying to me that, you're expected to go to funerals. If somebody from your community passes away, or, there's family member, distant family.
Maya, if you do not go to our funerals, there's a saying, who's going to bury you? Because you refuse to go to funerals. Who's going to come to your funeral? And even with my mom, anytime she goes to a funeral and she comes back, she'll say, oh my gosh, it was such a big, beautiful funeral.
Okay, so based on this experience that you had, what would Mapelo's funeral look like? What do you want? If you could write down a list now, a wish list, what would it be?
You know what, Maya, I've thought about it, and it is definitely not less. I want a little bit more, okay? When people find out that I've dropped dead, I want messages to pour through to my siblings, to my kids, to my partner, the whole works. Then I want people to go to my house, and pay their respects. I want people to have chat. I will buy bubbly. I'll make sure that, that is taken care of. People can have some bubbly, people can have some tea, but just to really share stories about our lives together and people to laugh and say, oh, do you remember the time she did this and this and that? I want the funeral, right? I want the whole thing. I want there to be catering. I want there to be community, right? I want a celebration of life. That's what I want. So definitely not...
Sorry, we're running
snacks.
15 minutes late.
Yeah, no.
Quiches and sandwiches.
No, please feed the people. Make sure that they're full.
And are there particular hymns?
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. That is such a good one, Maya. I have one of my favorite hymns from growing up, and it's in Sesotho. It actually just gives me goosebumps. So that's the hymn that I want on that day. Yeah.
So there you are. So we can write wish lists. So
and for you?
So I have to just tell you up front that I've had to tell many of my friends what I want because John has actually literally said that he's not having a funeral for me. He cannot bear the thought of having to deal with people at all.
And don't worry, I'll deal with them.
So that's it. So my friends have said, don't worry, we're here for you. Because he said he'll be in so much grief at the thought of having to even stand in front of people and talk. He just doesn't think he can manage that. So I need other people to support.
Yes.
But I really, my church is the mountain, as you well know, because I've dragged you up a few.
Yes.
We need to do some more. Mapala has promised she's getting
Haft. That's my way.
And there is a place, and I've said to John, I said, there's this beautiful area. I said, I want everyone to walk there. They'll have to wear their tackies. So it won't be wedding clothes. It'll be tackies. And I want to celebrate my life there. And I want to be cremated. So my ashes can be scattered there. Definitely bubbly. And that's what I want. So mine will be outdoors and celebrating my life. But I do, again, where I am in my life, I want it to be celebratory. I want it to be joy. I want it to be happiness. I want that.
But I definitely can see, it's not just for me, what feels like a cold, okay, that's chapter's done. But I mean, I think the hiking up will give us time to reflect and say, remember we went to this art fair with Maya and she took me hiking for the first time and I huffed and puffed. So for me, I'm all for that, Maya. And I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Yes.
Got my leg. So you see, this is what matters. And I think this is one of the things we obviously wanted to talk about is the cost of these funerals. Because, and we did a little vox pop ahead of this episode, just to go out onto the street and to find out from ordinary South Africans how much they expect a funeral to cost. It was hysterical to watch this.
I would think it would be for free, but I recently had one and it's definitely not free. It's actually very expensive. So my sister had a cremation and that was only to take the body away and cremate it was 30,000 rand, which is completely overpriced.
So, I mean, I think that for me sums it up. And in that it's so, and I was trying to work this out and you and I were having this conversation. So I was trying to think why, honestly, when I went onto social media and I said, how much does a funeral cost? I was getting so much information on LinkedIn from all my Black followers.
Yep.
Not a single white person told me at all what a funeral cost. They could tell me, they were sending me spreadsheets of the caterers, of the tent, of the tombstone, of the casket. They had this whole, everyone could share their information. Then I thought, well, let me contact, I've got friends whose parents have passed away recently. I went to them. I said, how much did the funeral cost? They didn't know. So I was trying to work out why this disconnect. And you said something so interesting to me. You said, because we contribute to each other's funerals.
Yes, yeah. Because it's a community. If you know this person, we have an idea of what a funeral costs and we know that it costs a lot. So if, let's say, a friend's dad has passed away or a family member has passed away, if you cannot make it physically, you will send some sort of contribution. And I mean, even at our funerals, you have a plate. Hey, actually, you have a plate that goes around for collection. Some people put it in envelopes just so that, we know that this is going to be a hard road. There's lots of money that is going to be spent and people always make a contribution. Let me tell you a funny thing. My mom, recently, my dad's brother passed away and they knew that I couldn't make it, And my mom said, well, we know that you're not going to be able to make it and, condolences, fine. But please remember to send something in the bank.
No, I mean, that is totally and utterly not even, you just even wouldn't think about it. And I was wondering, is it that there's an affluence element. So being affluent, these costs are not that significant. But I think literally the white culture spends a far, far, far less on funerals than you do find in the African culture. And I suppose this is where the whole question is coming up. And I was interviewed by somebody from the United Nations. They were doing a huge amount of research globally on the costs of funerals and funeral insurance. Do you know that he told me that not Africa, South Africa has the highest spend on funerals in the world?
The entire world, not in
whole world, not in. So in other words, they're saying even within Africa, South Africa spends more money on funerals. And I wonder, so this is, I think, the debate is, are we spending too much on funerals? So yes, I get what you're saying about maybe too little, but there's also then it's too much. And there were people on LinkedIn telling me that they'd spent 250,000 Rand on a funeral.
Sure.
And, and I think there's many cases where the family member may be leaving children behind. And those children are not necessarily, that contribution that goes on the plate isn't going to the children. It's going to the funeral. So how do we manage that conversation?
Sure, Maya, it's a very difficult one because I think when people are in the moment of just getting the funeral to just pass, I think that's all they're focused on. I have never, in my experience, perhaps other people could have a different experience, but with the funerals that I've gone to and they were young children, I know that conversation came later, right? So the money has been spent, there's been like lots of expenses. That conversation only comes later to say, okay, what is going to happen to the kids, that sort of thing. But the entire process, it's about, okay, what kind of casket we're going to choose, what kind of tombstone, the whole thing, catering. And it's very unfortunate. And I think we should be doing it the other way around.
I think that would definitely be a good start. But I did also get some comments from people on LinkedIn saying to me, and one said, and many, I don't think there's a single person listening who would say, I think that we're not spending enough on funerals. I think everyone would agree that it's overspent and there's this feeling of obligation. And not only of the cost of funeral, but having to go to the funeral and the cost of travel and all of those things. It's putting a huge strain on communities. But as one guy said to me, he said, it's easy to say it's a waste of money and that you won't do it when someone close to you dies before it happens to you. If your mom dies tomorrow, it's likely that you'll make very different decisions. When you're in the middle of grief, you actually don't consider it being wasteful. You consider it to be paying your last respects to your loved ones whom you cared for so deeply. It's your last act of giving them dignity. And that comes back to the whole thing about, well, this was my mom.
Yeah.
And I want the best casket. And I want her to feel that everybody loved her. So and these funerals are like 500 people.
Yeah. Oh, no, they get very big. They get very, very big. But, for me, what I thought was fascinating when I was reflecting on funerals and culture is they are big for sure. But remember, a lot of people don't grow up with much, or we come from backgrounds where there isn't a lot of money. When there is a funeral, anyone who is homeless, anyone who living with some sort of disability in that neighborhood, they know on that day that they will be fed. So it's really based on community, a lot on community.
It's very interesting because when one of the guys who sent in his numbers said to me, we planned for 250 people and we'll end up feeding 350 people. Oh, yeah. And that extra 100 people is exactly that. You don't know who's coming. So you have no idea. Absolutely no idea. In our culture, we send out invites that we can say, okay, to the caterers, we need.
So if I were to rock up and I didn't get an invite?
Yes, it would be okay. I mean, nobody's going to kick you out.
Yes, but I mean,
generally you probably wouldn't know when the funeral was. Remember, it doesn't get published anywhere. So you would be notified. You'd get a notification and this is the funeral. I mean, a friend of ours died recently and it was incredibly tragic, leaving his family. There were 500 people at that funeral.
Yeah.
They had to even put screens outside the church for the huge community that came out. But there was no food afterwards. So the small group of the family members, the family members and close friends went to a restaurant afterwards to celebrate his life. Wow. There isn't this expectation of the catering. And when I looked at the costs, the spreadsheets that people were sending me, catering is
massive one,
huge part of it. So that's a big price difference.
And do you think that's why especially in our community, I mean, whenever I take a look at someone's finances, the first thing normally is they have tons and tons of funeral policies. Do you want to talk about that?
I do want to talk about funeral policies, but before we get there, I also just wanted to, one of the things that I had noticed as well in the, comparisons is that white people generally get cremated. And in the Black community, there's burial. And burial's a lot more expensive than cremation. Again, we're coming down to, I don't know, what is it? Is there a cultural reason for burial?
Maya, I have no idea. I don't think, with me, it being a Sotho person, my husband is Tswana, we don't have any cultural thing to saying, okay, you should not get cremated. I mean, I have had a couple of people, cousins, even from my husband's side, that have been cremated. So the younger generation are more open to cremation, right? But the older generation, you talk about cremation, it's like, so they're going to burn you because you're thinking about it in a literal sense. And I mean, you're gone, so it's not like you're going to feel much. But I think there is that fear around cremation that, why would you do that? It's still a little bit taboo for a lot of people. Yeah.
So it's interesting because that in the Vox Pop, the one white guy that answered the question, it was a cremation, right? So there is a funeral provider that's actually now offering, this is aquamation.
Aquamation.
Where you don't burn the body, you use water and heat to speed up the decomposing, the body decomposes quicker, and apparently it saves 90% of energy.
Oh, wow.
And this is going to start, they think is going to start to become quite popular because, of course, burying is expensive. You don't necessarily have space any longer. So who knows? Who knows what will come up? We may be able to
Definitely
adjust.
going to do my research on that one and see, should I change my will?
So you're not burning anymore.
Yeah.
You're just you're in water. So there we go. We'll see. I'll be very interested to get feedback from everybody listening to this, how they feel about aquamation.
Yes.
But I want to go back to that, the funeral policies, because this also came up in this UN research, was the amount that South Africans spend on funeral policies. And there was further research done that found that 52% of people said that they thought of funeral cover as investments and that they don't necessarily use it for the funeral. So in other words, they feel that they'll take it out for the family members, and then if the family member passes away, they have a hit jackpot. Now, I'm not going to go into the morality of that, but I think it's really important to understand how expensive funeral cover actually is. And I did an article on this, and I just want to actually call it up because I've got the numbers here. So, and I think this is really what worries me is I think there's two things that are happening with funeral cover, and you and I have both seen it, where you have multiple funeral covers. And people feel, when I say to somebody, well, why don't you just consolidate into one funeral policy? And I actually had a look at this woman. She was spending 1,250 Rand a month for cover. And it was 40,000 for herself, 6,000 for her daughter. She had for her father, mother, sister, and her brother, also around 20,000. And I went into the market and I got a quote for 500 Rand for the same cover. And I said to her, well, you could cancel the cover you have. You would save 750 Rand a month. You've got an 4-year-old daughter. If you invested that 750 Rand for her education, how much money would you have? She would have about 150,000 Rand by the time the daughter turned 18.
Sure.
So this is what I'm trying to say, is that I think people are buying all these funeral policies instead of saying, okay, yes, funeral insurance is important, but let me get cost-effective funeral insurance, and then the amount that I'm saving, I put forward for my child. Because remember, we need to remember about the next generation. Yeah. But the response that I often get is people saying, yes, but then I've lost the money that I've all those premiums I've paid, without understanding it's insurance. It's like car insurance. It's month by month. There's no investment that you've lost there.
There's no value at the end of the day. And I think, I have spoken to tons of people, and that's the consensus that, no, but, I'm losing my investment. And it's not an investment. Insurance is insurance. Savings and investments, completely, completely different. But I mean, how do you change people's perception when they keep on saying, well, I don't want to lose all the amounts that I've paid for all these years?
I think you've just got to keep explaining it,
Yeah.
saying if you have car insurance, if you're insuring your car and another insurer says to you, oh, we can give it to you cheaper, the same insurance, the cheaper, would you think about changing? And of course you would. We do it all the time. And funeral insurance is exactly the same way. But I mean, I have had this argument with well-educated people. I'm not talking, it's not about financial literacy. It's like people are well. In fact, there was an academic at a university that I was having this discussion with. So it's an important concept, and it comes back to this belief that it's an investment. So then I also looked at it in my article. I said, okay, for those people who feel that this is like a way to get a little bit of extra cash, okay, morality aside, I went and I asked a large insurer, so this was a relatively good value for money, 3,000 Rand a month, okay? So I was trying to match it with the tax-free savings account. So I said 3,000 Rand a month. How much funeral cover would I get? So they would have given the main member and the spouse 100,000 each, the mother 40, father 40, brother 30, other brother 30, daughter 20. So quite a lot of cover. But I then said, what if you invested that 3,000 Rand a month into a tax-free savings account? Yep. Within 5 years, you would have about 230,000 Rand saved. So if you go back and you look at that life cover and you're saying of that funeral cover, how many people would have had to have died for this to be an investment? Yeah. Remember, I'm talking about this not to actually cover the event, but because you think it's an investment. I mean, both you and your spouse would have had to have passed away in those 5 years, or the rest of your entire family, which I hope never happens to you. So, and in comparison, for just 100 Rand a month, they could have taken life insurance for 300,000 Rand. So I think a lot of the education that you and I are trying to do is to help people understand how these fit into your financial plan, and that, life cover has a very specific need, but funeral cover can be cost effective and also for very, very specific needs.
Yeah. And I think just making sure that people know the difference between life insurance and funeral cover, but also knowing that, there is investments for your future, right? And I think it's very important to say funeral cover covers the funeral, and that's it. Life insurance is saying, okay, I have young kids. I want to make sure that they're taken care of well into the future. And investments are saying, I'm going to live to enjoy my money one day.
Exactly. We need to separate those, and we need to be cost effective about those. But let's sum up, because we want to make this practical. We want to give advice to you guys. So I think the first thing is, please review your funeral cover. If you have 15 different policies, I promise you can consolidate those, save the money, take those savings and start investing it. So that would be my one piece. But what about, Apollo, your parents? Have you sat down with your parents and said, what are your expectations around your funeral and how are you planning?
That's a very important conversation, Maya. You know what? I had this conversation with my siblings maybe about a year now. And it was uncomfortable even to bring it up, but I know the consequences of not having the conversation. And I remember one of my sisters saying, yeah, you know what, it's difficult, but yeah, actually, let's have a separate account where we can just put money in there just in case something does happen, right? The conversation, on the other hand, of my parents, my mom is someone who's very open. She even has what do you call a kist, like what do you call it now?
A kist, or like a place where she puts
yes. So low wardrobe where she puts all her stuff. And she's quite comfortable saying, you know what, I have funeral insurance, I have this, I have that, and this is where you'll find everything. If I drop dead tomorrow, you know where the key stays, and these are all my stuff. My father, on the other hand, I think is like a typical person who thinks that if you start talking around death, it's like you're calling it onto yourself. But I know my mom has spoken to him and they are on the same page. We know exactly what's going to happen. But you must have those conversations with your siblings, because that's the people you're going to be left with. And also have that conversation with your parents around expectation. I mean, I know my mother. So we're making sure that her needs are going to be met. But also she has made provision so that her needs will be met.
And how do you have that conversation with someone? I mean, I know it's happened to you in your personal life with your brother-in-law. There's children. And how do you make sure that the conversation also centers around the needs of the children and those who are left versus, okay, as siblings, we're going to club together and help, but how do we also help the kids? Because I think that point is what that worries me more than anything, is that we spend all the money on the funeral and nothing is left for the children.
Oh, Maya, it's such a difficult one. But I'll give you an example. with my siblings and I, we all have wills, right? So in the will, we explicitly say, if both my husband and I would pass away, this is the guardian, right? So you have to have the conversation with the guardian. You can't just put it in your will and hopefully that takes care of itself. But I think it's just allowing yourself to have those tough conversations as siblings to say, if anything happened to you, what would happen to the kids? I mean, I've had one client who had her finances in order. Around COVID, her sister passed away, left 2 kids with her. Now she went from 2 kids to 4 children. And now her finances just completely went out the window. So it is very important to have those conversations, Maya.
Absolutely. So we've gone there. We've discussed funerals. I am now maybe rethinking my funeral ideas. I'm really glad that I've got a friend like you who's going to come and bring cookies, who's going to entertain my friends who are going to come to the house, and my husband's hiding in the bedroom. So thank you in advance.
Most welcome.
And to all of those listening, please, we love your feedback. We want to hear more from you, and join us for our next episode, because we're going to lighten things up a little bit. We're going to find out how much this gorgeous woman spends on her hair and nails, and why she thinks a wig will improve my marriage.
Oh yeah, I cannot wait to get into that conversation, because I've been threatening to get you a wig for many years.